Well, as you all know, our special guest today is Kansas Commissioner of Education, Dr. Randy Watson. He's going to be discussing with us some of the struggles and the challenges and the successes around reopening schools in this era of the pandemic, and trying to pivot from in-person to hybrid to completely remote learning. And as you all know, it's been a varying process across the state. So welcome, Commissioner Watson. I'll let him finish taking his drink of water. And I wondered, do you need to share your screen? Would you like to do that?
Okay. Yes, Leah, if that wouldn't be a problem. And thank you, Mark and Leah. Appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you. And so I would say, well, how's everyone doing? But I know the answer, not well, okay? None of us are doing well. We could ask parents the same thing. This is a struggle, right? This is a struggle for every single person in America. And what I'm going to lay out for you are some things to think about long term. Then we can do some Q&A. I'm not here to say I have the answers. Boy, if we had the answers, we would do it. But I want to say this. Nobody ever thought when you signed your name, hey, I think I'd like to run for the school board because it pays so well. And I just would like to give back to our community. No one thought you would be having meetings till midnight where half of the people hate you no matter the decision that you make. The emails and the phone calls would be threatening as people's passions are out there. That's not to blame anyone. It's to tell you that the pandemic is taking a toll on every single person. So I want to say, first of all, grace and thank you to the service that you give. I'm going to give you some scenarios to think about today, again, and not without challenges, on how we can do two things. We can have great learning environments and keep people as safe as possible. And so I'm going to walk through that with you, things that we've been sharing with superintendents. So with hopefully a little luck with the technology, we'll talk about it. As you know, as we went into this year, we have 3 learning environments going on in Kansas right now. This came out of Navigating Change. We have on-site, where people are going to school, hopefully doing masking, social distancing, and we can talk about activities and athletics in just a few minutes. Hybrid, we're generally operating as 50% capacity in order to social distance and keep our group size down. And then, of course, our guidelines, we have to go to that type of environment. Keep our spectator sports should really be taken a close look at. And then remote. And we have districts in all 3 of those. And even if we're on site, we know that we have some families that because of the virus have chosen to go remote. Even if we're in hybrid, some families have chosen to go remote. So really, in almost every district, we're in some combination of all 3 of these at any given time. And as we go forward, these were set up to look at the gating criteria and then to make decisions. If I'm in green, I'm on site. If I'm in yellow or orange, I'm in some combination of hybrid, on-site, remote. And if my data starts to look at red, then I am going remote. But all of these were set up for a temporary situation, a temporary pause. And so what I want you to think about is whatever environment you're in, we're going to be with this virus in some capacity for the rest of the school year. A couple of times a week, I get to meet with the brightest minds in Kansas, physicians, epidemiologists, public health people, and they're convinced, yes, we'll have a vaccine. Yes, we're going to have better antibacterial medicine. Yes, we're going to have a lot of things come at us, maybe starting as early as right after Thanksgiving. But we're talking about the whole country and the whole world having to take advantage of that, better testing. So The plan is we have to have models that will last us through the end of May that do all of the things that we know of. We have to support staff, students, and parents. And right now, those seem to be at odds with each other. We have to ensure safety throughout the rest of the year. And I want you to, when you get to that thinking of we're going to do this the rest of the year, then you get out of, I think, of this thinking of, well, if we can just, remember this back in the spring, if we can just get to August, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. Oh, you know, in August, if we can just get after Labor Day, it's going to be fine. If we can just get to Halloween and parent-teacher conferences, or if we can just get through the first semester, it's going to be fine. And most of our planning has been in that mode. And so I want us to think about how would we plan to accommodate learning and safety for the rest of the school year. So here's what districts are currently facing. Remote and hybrid work really well at bringing down the virus cases. If you're in a district that is remote or hybrid, you're seeing, for the most part, your caseloads come down. Interesting enough, those districts are primarily larger districts. We'll talk about that more. They're primarily large 4A to 6A districts, many multiple high school districts are in hybrid remote. Learning's not as effective as if we were on site, and parents in those communities are growing increasingly upset with you, right? Because they don't like the remote and hybrid and they want to come to school. Model is probably most likely not sustainable all school year. On the other side, we have on-site. Works well for learning. Staff, students, and parents are generally happy. Generally, these districts are smaller. They're the small school districts to the small 4A. Schools and activities, though, are being disrupted in these schools at a high rate because, unlike the hybrid and remote, they're getting increased virus cases. And they're getting 3-4 kids that they end up quarantining 80 kids, and then they have a staff problem every day. When I talk to them, they say this model probably isn't likely to sustain us through the year because every day we're on pins and needles about who's going to leave us and be quarantined and who's going to have to be out of school. And so we've got these things back and forth that are wearing on us. As we take a look at what could we do going forward. So what do we do now? Well, we have to try to think of how do we get cohorts of kids, less than 15 kids in a group. And when we say that, every school board member is, Randy, there's no way. And I know that, right? One of the advantages if you're in a small school district, you generally can do this much easier than if you're a large. If you're in Olathe with 30,000 kids, how do I do that? And we have to have safe but unused facilities in the district and the community that have to be utilized to stop the spread for students. So there's 3 major problems we have in doing that. We don't have enough maybe good facilities in our community to include safety. What are those? They're churches, they're community buildings, they're places that aren't being used. I'll use the Ramada Inn here in Topeka. You know how big the Ramada Inn is? There's nobody at the Ramada Inn. The restaurant, the bar shut down. All that convention area center is shut down. Someone could be using that for classrooms, I bet, for pennies on the dollar because there's no one using it. Old malls. We're going to have to rethink differently in our community. Now, you get somewhere like Shawnee Heights, boy, there's not a lot. There's Piper. There's not a lot of other places because those are small communities that have larger school districts because they're bedroom communities. So that's the first, lack of good facilities. Then we don't have enough qualified staff, Randy, to lower class sizes to 15. Now, let me just tell you, there's nothing magical about 15. What's magical is how many square feet do you have in that classroom, and can you keep kids 6 feet apart? So that generally in a normal size classroom is 15, but if you're in an old building, that's going to be less because those classrooms are smaller. If you're in a new building, you might be able to put 17 or 18 because the square footage, in some cases, you're in 1,500 square foot classrooms in some of the newer facilities. And then of course, we're going to need financial resources to accomplish this. Those are our problems, and then there's logistics problems in doing what I'm talking about. So let's look at the facilities. Gyms, libraries, rec facilities, sport arenas. We're going to have to utilize those as classrooms the rest of the school year. I really believe we're going to have to. Outside areas, we're going, that'll be done here in a few weeks in October in Kansas, and then we'll pick back up in the spring. But where we can, you're going to have to get your community together, start talking about where could we spread kids out. Many cases, for those that have neighborhood elementary schools, you know what are around those neighborhood elementary schools? Churches. I don't know why, but there's generally churches and schools in fairly close proximity to each other. But we need to look at all of those. Got to get consistent between your classes and cohorts, meaning they don't come back and forth. Once you locate them there, that's where they're going to stay. And you probably need to try to get technology that'll tie those back to the original school. People. I need people. So we're going to first have to use our certified staff differently. If you have instructional coaches, substitutes, aides, paras, assistant principals, central office staff, reading specialists, librarians, retired teachers, all hands on deck, everyone's going to need to teach a class this year. Everyone's going to need to be a teacher again. Almost everyone. We're going to have to do that in order to have enough people to pull this off. We are going to ask the state board to do something in October about waiving the requirements for emergency subs to get those to be used greater across school districts. We can't generate more people, but we can hopefully free up the requirements. And if you need help with licensure, I helped 2 people today, Michelle Miller, we contact her, we'll try to make it happen and get that person in the classroom. Financial resources. Again, we come to our community, our city, county, chambers and say, look, what space do we have that maybe we can use because it's not being rented out? My heart sunk yesterday, non-educationally. The Brookville Hotel closed its doors. 18 something? We ought to do something about that. If you've ever eaten chicken and coleslaw and cream corn at the Brookville Hotel, that's an experience. But I'm saying we have people that I think would rent a space for very low cost because it's not being used in other ways. We're going to have to use our CARES money that went directly to schools and Spark money. We're going to have to go back to the county and say, we need your help to rent staff and facilities. And yes, for over 100 school districts, we're going to have to use our contingency funds. If you've got more than 15% of your contingency funds, this is a rainy day time. So issues not still resolved. It's really hard to do this. You got busing issues. We'll talk. You've got food service distribution. You've got special ed. All of your specials have to be done differently. This is really hard to execute. But as long as we play high risk activities, which politically we all have to do, we're still going to have spread. And quarantines are still very likely. You can see that going on as football teams are scrambling, trying to find who they're going to play this weekend because of spread. And I want to speak to large middle schools and high schools. You're not going to be able to get to 15. But here's what you can do in middle schools. You can separate your middle schools out, and then teachers can rotate. Kids stay, teachers rotate, because you're already used to teaming. Middle schools, different model. High schools, you're probably going to need to think about still being in a hybrid, but maybe going 5 days a week, half days, instead of 2 to 3 days a week. 2 to 3 days a week really cause trouble with daycare and work schedules and everything else. Now, I told you this is not a solution. These are some ideas. What we're trying to do, and I'll stop the share here. What we're trying to do is pretty simple, hard to execute. Mask up, keep 6 feet apart. If you can mask up and keep 6 feet apart all day, we can have school and we can be safe. We can be almost quarantine immune, meaning if someone does get it, we take them out, but the whole class doesn't have to be quarantined. The medical people will sign off on that. It is a safe environment. But I know what all of you are seeing. You're seeing some combination of parents saying, I'm not going to quarantine anymore. I don't believe in it. I'm not going to go get tested because then my kid won't play football on Friday night. You're having teachers say, you can't just put everyone back in. This isn't safe. And that tension is something I've never seen you have to handle. I wish I could take it away from you. I can't. I do think the long-term solution, even with the vaccine, even with better antivirals, even with better testing, is over the long term, we have to find ways to move kids outside of 10 minutes here or there, 6 feet apart, and everyone has to wear a mask. The tsunami, the first one that overtook us was, are we going to wear a mask or not? Believe it or not, we're still fighting this in Kansas. I was a place where I walked to a Casey's store. It said, thank you for wearing your mask and keeping people protected. It was packed in that Casey's. I was the only one wearing a mask, including the person making the pizzas. All right, so we're still fighting this in many of our communities, but it works. The transmission rate, what we can tell teachers, if I have this on and Mark Tallman has this on and we don't get within 6 feet, the transmission rate is really, really, really low. So this, it was the first tsunami. All right, some of you said, man, we didn't have that one where I'm at. We didn't have that tsunami. How about, are you going to play football Friday night? How about that tsunami? Remember when that came? Are we going to have sports? Remember how big that was? They get bigger. If you haven't noticed, these tsunamis, Lou, get bigger every time they come. And then it was, the one you're facing right now is, hey, we just need to be back to school. We just need to come back to school. Again, the virus will be over come election day or whatever, but we need to be back to school. And the next one, when that happens, by the way, that's when you start to lose the teachers and the staff saying, then I don't know that we're coming because you don't have a safe environment. And the next one that's going to come is, forget the gating criteria, forget the science, forget the data. We're going to ignore every bit of it. We're not going to quarantine 14 days. We just won't tell you we have it. We're seeing that happen, where parents are bringing their kids to school when they've been tested positive or they've been told to quarantine and they're not telling anyone. All of that, we've got to get our communities together and say, how do we have school and how are we going to be safe, not through Christmas, through the rest of the year. I went through that really quick, but I think over the next several months, we have to figure out ways to transition to that, whether you're small or large. Because again, I talked to a school district, a small 4A. They have quarantined since the beginning of school, 30% of their student body and 52% of their high school at some point have been quarantined. Every day, the superintendent and the school board president says, I don't want to start Monday because I never know on any day who I'm going to get the call about who has to go. And then I don't have enough teachers and I've got to move them around. And the teachers are telling me, I'm exhausted. Can we have a break? By the way, you know why there's no breaks? We front loaded all the time to have our PD up front to get ready for the start of the year, which was the right thing to do. And now we don't have many days built in to even give some breaks, right? We may have to call a timeout. We may have to do some things we just have to think differently about. The state board and I will help you in any way we can because we know the stress that you're under. There is not a playbook for this, nowhere. And I know that you can get on the internet and find anything to support any position that you want to take. So Leah, Mark, I'd be happy to try to answer questions or engage in conversation with people that have dedicated their lives to the public education of kids. And I tell our superintendents, I hope they're at least giving you a bottle of water and some peanut M&Ms, right? We'll upscale to the peanut M&Ms because I know how hard you're working, how tired you are.
Dr. Watson, before we go to questions, we did have a question as to whether your slides would be available. Would you, if you would like to email those to me, I could then post them to the KASB website within a few minutes of this Zoom being finished. And I'm gonna, folks, I'm gonna click, I just sent you a link in the chat. That's our advocacy key resources page, and that is where Dr. Watson's slides as well as our slides will be posted later today. So thank you very much for letting me interject, and then I believe we have
Oh,
some
thank you. I dropped it into the chat. And
Oh, there we go. Excellent.
But I also will send it to you, okay?
Thank you.
It needs to have both. I will tell you, you know, we've got some districts that have taken this on from small to big, not without problems. So I hold Heston up as a model that took the Crosswinds Convention Center and 4 churches and did basically what we said. I give Tiffany Anderson, the staff in 501, they've got about 65% of their kids back, and they've got them spread out by they call them micro classrooms. You'll hear her talk about that. And she's not 100% there, but she's got a plan. So, you know, as I look, you know, Janie, I'm looking at you, so I'm picking on you. But if, you know, KCK, your plan doesn't have to be in the next 2 weeks, right? It could be by the time we come back after Thanksgiving, here's where we want to be. Because we're going to need to take a deep breath on some of this with our larger districts. You know, I know Olathe had a board meeting last night that went long. And, you know, where do you move 30,000 kids in Olathe? Tough. I was on the phone with you know, our legislative leaders and the governor. We all have to think about this and work together. So,
Commissioner, it looks like if you want to look in the chat, our past president Shannon Kimball has a comment, and it looks like she also has a question. And I'd advise others, if you want to put them in the chat, if you want to unmute and try to talk, you can, but we don't want people talking over each other. So we'll let the commissioner take a look at that question if he can.
yeah, and if you don't mind typing it, it would help, or just get a couple of words. So Shannon, we did address it a little bit in the navigating change in terms of the ventilation. It's really important because most of our newer systems are sealed systems where you can't open windows. So, and I know this is a hot topic right now because nationally, people are asking what the air quality was on the first presidential debate stage, right? Now that the president's tested positive, the question is, were the people in the audience? So what and so let me get to all the questions. Shannon, yes, we can update that. As we get better information, we will update that. So if you've got some information for us on that safety guidance, please send it our way. But in the navigating change, we talk about running your air handlers 24/7. You've got it with as much fresh air as you can do in Kansas and not overload the system humidity-wise. So what's really great about October, our humidity's coming down, and so we can raise the amount of fresh air that's coming in. So the more fresh air you can mix in that system, the better. And you've got a HEPA high-grade medical, listen to this carefully, high-grade medical grade HEPA, not HEPA-like, you'll get all kinds of people sell you stuff, high-grade medical grade HEPA filtration on these large systems. And then we would recommend medical grade HEPA purifiers in the classrooms in addition to that. Now, Shannon, and then any other things that you would have or anyone else have, send us the new data, because we're constantly looking at that, like UV lights and things like that. UV lights to be effective, what I've been told, by the way, everything I tell you is what I've been told by people a lot smarter than me. It works, but the air has to be exposed to it for long enough. If the air is passing really fast, it may not be exposed long enough for the UV light to work really well, but it can work. So medical grade HEPA, like they use in surgery rooms, 24/7 ventilation, portable HEPAs in the classroom. That's a good use of Spark money, good use of CARES money. There's again, you got to do your research because there's a lot of HEPA likes out there and we want the best. But you, Shannon, I'm taking a lot of time on this, but I will say we're spending probably more time, this is Randy's opinion now, when I look at districts, we're spending more time on the cleaning the touch points, which really we should be doing handles and restrooms and yes, classrooms some, but we're spending a lot of time on that where we really ought to put our time on the air quality. So I'm not saying don't spend, but I see most of our time on the physical spraying down of things where it's the air quality that really will be where we can get the best bang for our buck in terms of the spread of the virus. Mask, 6 feet, good air quality handlers, and then yes, disinfecting. And I will tell you, the risk then drops really, really low. I'm not going to give you a statistic because I'd be slightly wrong on that, but it's really low on transmission.
Commissioner, there's another question on sports guidelines as we move to indoor sports.
Yes, so let me tell you what our high risk. Football, high risk. Basketball, high risk. Wrestling, high risk. Football's the worst because you've got 11 on 11 or 6 on 6 or 8 on 8, depending on your size of school. And every play, they collide, right, and lay on each other for a time, and then they get up. Wrestling is high risk, but it's one-on-one, right? I mean, you're one-on-one. Now, practice is a problem. What aren't problems? Boy, you can run cross country and you can play tennis and you can play golf, and even volleyball is not as bad outside of practice because you never cross the net. So those are better. But let's think about when you get inside, whether it's volleyball right now or basketball. Shannon's question, you got to have air handlers in those facilities that are going to scrub the air even better than what we're doing now, because that's going to help a spectator. So the guidance is already out there on indoor sports, but can I just say, Claudia, almost everyone's ignoring the guidance on sports. And I understand why, because the political pressure to do it is overwhelming, right? That's why the Big Ten decided to add it. That's why the Pac-10 went back and added it, because that's so much of our culture that we have to have it there. But we're constantly looking at it. Let me get to Mary.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, testing. Yes, so we're getting hundreds of thousands of testing from Abbott Labs, Mary, and those will be quick test, antigen test for asymptomatic people that can show results in as little as 15 minutes. It will primarily, though, go first to nursing homes and then to first responders, and then schools will get some. But testing will tell you who, but it does not stop the quarantine. There's a misconception out there that if I can test my way out of it, I'm fine. And I want to give you 2 examples where testing still doesn't tell us everything. Pro football. Dr. Meckel will probably help me here. I can't remember the team that tested positive on Monday. Can someone else? I would ask Mr. Tallman, but I don't think that would work. He would give me that look right there. So who is it, Doug?
Titans.
They tested positive on Monday. By the way, the NFL tests every single day, right? Every single day they test. So they're sophisticated. On Monday, large number of them test positive. What every doctor's told me this week is we don't know if they were contagious on Sunday, even though they tested negative. Same thing, the same questions going on in the White House today, right? When was President Trump, when was he contagious? We know when he tested positive, and we now know when he had the first symptoms. So Mary, it's a long answer. We're going to get better testing. I call it, eventually we're going to get to like the pregnancy test, right? You'll just spit on something, it'll turn a color, and in 15 minutes you'll know. That will be helpful in keeping asymptomatic people out of the workforce or out of school, and it's coming. But it's going to be a while before we have enough of it.
Is that sort of testing coming to schools, or is it going to house with county health departments and doctors' offices and still be really dependent upon parents taking their kids to doctors' offices, versus if we're holding them within our own school districts, within our school administration, then we probably have a little bit more ability to follow through with that testing?
Great question, Carla. Thank you. And I'll tag it on with Mary's. These will go directly to you. They're going to need to be administered by a school nurse. So there's going to have to be some, we're not quite to the stage where you self-administer. So there's a little, you have to mix some chemicals right now. But the Abbott testing that's coming is a 15-minute test, antigen testing for asymptomatic people. And we've got some schools who have already volunteered, and we'll be looking for more as we get more supply. But the supply should start to come in the next week or so. And so it will go directly to schools. Now, I say that, though your counties will have some too, but schools will have them also. That you don't have to go to the county to get the test. Great question. I am more than happy. We do Thursday Zooms with superintendents, and we call them other people. You're always welcome to join. We tell, we don't record those because people say, we want to be free to say what we want, but we do them and we try. What I try to do is say, this is what we see right now. I've been in about 45 school districts since the start of school. I will tell you, what we're doing is not sustainable. And I don't mean that harshly. Teachers can't do it. My wife's an elementary principal. I will tell you, if she's awake at 9 o'clock, I'm surprised. My daughter's a middle school teacher. She's also pregnant with our first grandchild, and she's exhausted. I know you are exhausted. Tempers are running high. Parents cannot stay home for 9 months. So we're either going to have kids, which that have no supervision, and depression and all that goes up regardless of what we do. So we have to figure out long-term solutions to this. As my ophthalmologist that I go to for regular checkup said, there will not be a time ever in my life again that I don't have a mask. That will be my new normal forever because I know what it now does to keep people healthy. So I just, I look at all of you, and my heart pours out to you because I know the struggle you're going through, and I know you didn't sign up for this. So again, I've said it before, but I want to say it again. Thank you. I can't thank you enough for your service.